The twin suns of Valen 5 burned low on the horizon, painting the alien sky in colors no human eye had seen before. Violet clouds swirling around rivers of gold light. The air smelled faintly sweet, like a mix of sugar and static. The great market of Tiravel City was alive with sound, voices calling out strange names of fruits and spices, laughter echoing through narrow glowing streets, and the hum of crystal hover carts gliding between stalls. Among this alien chaos walked Captain Reed, the only human for light years. His brown leather jacket looked dull next to the shining robes of the alien merchants. Some stared at him with curiosity, others with quiet fear. He could feel the weight of their eyes, yet he walked calmly, pretending not to notice. Reed had traveled across half the galaxy looking for trade partners. But this planet felt different. The people here didn't just sell goods, they guarded secrets. The fruit stands glowed with soft light, each fruit pulsing gently as if alive. Reed stopped at one stall, his gaze caught by a tray of round, shimmering fruits that glowed blue and pink under the suns. The sign above them read, "Melons of Greeting." Behind the stall stood a young alien girl, tall, slender, her skin a faint silver tone that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Her large violet eyes were filled with warmth and intelligence. Her hair glowed faintly, like threads of starlight flowing down her shoulders. Her name tag read Lyra. Reed smiled politely and said, "Hello. I've never seen fruits like these before. Are they edible?" The girl looked at him in surprise. "You're human," she said softly, almost like a question. He nodded. "Captain Reed of the Terran Alliance. Just exploring markets, not making trouble." Lyra tilted her head, her delicate features puzzled but kind. "You wish to greet me?" Reed blinked, confused. Sure, I guess. Greetings." He extended his hand in the universal gesture of peace. Lyra's eyes widened. She gasped. The color drained from her face. The crowd around them suddenly went silent. Then she shouted, voice trembling, "Human! You're supposed to greet my melons, not my hand. It's custom." Reed froze mid-handshake. Around him, dozens of alien faces turned to stare. Some giggled behind their hands, others whispered nervously. A group of elders frowned, shaking their heads in disapproval. I didn't mean anything wrong," Reed said quickly. "It's a greeting on my world. We shake hands like this." Lyra looked horrified. "On my world, touching someone's hand is intimate. It means you wish to share breath and blood. It's a promise." Reed's eyes widened. "A promise of what?" She whispered. "Of union." The laughter stopped. The whole market fell into dead silence. Reed felt every alien eye on him, and he could almost hear the air tighten. 2 armored guards began walking toward him, their crystal helmets shining in the light. "Human," one barked. "You have broken sacred custom. You've claimed a daughter of Valen without the right." Reed raised his hands. "I didn't know. It was an accident." The guards didn't listen. The taller one raised a glowing staff. "Ignorance does not erase guilt. You will be judged by the High Temple." Lyra looked terrified. Her hands trembled as she picked up 2 glowing melons. She turned to the guards. "Please, he didn't mean it. He's from another world." But the guards moved closer. The crowd whispered again and someone muttered, "The last human who touched one of us was burned." Reed's heartbeat quickened. His instinct screamed to run, but he couldn't leave the frightened girl behind. "Listen," he said quietly, leaning closer to her. "If I stay, I die. If you stay, you'll be blamed for helping me. Come with me." Lyra hesitated, eyes darting between him and the guards. Then she whispered, "Follow me." She suddenly grabbed his arm, lightly but firmly, and darted through a side passage behind her stall. The glowing fruits on her cart trembled and fell as she pulled him into the maze of narrow, dimly lit alleys. The guards shouted behind them, their boots echoing. They ran through tunnels lit by neon moss and the soft hum of alien insects. Reed's boots splashed through shallow puddles, his lungs burning. Lyra moved like liquid light, fast and graceful. When they finally stopped, hidden behind a stack of old fruit crates, Lyra pressed a finger to her lips. "Quiet, they will search every block," Reed nodded, trying to catch his breath. The air in the small alley was warm, filled with the scent of sweet fruit and electric spice. After a long silence, Lyra looked at him again. "You really didn't know our custom?" He shook his head. "No, where I come from, shaking hands means friendship, not union." Lyra smiled faintly for the first time. Then you are lucky you met me first. Some would have cut off your hand. Reed gave a nervous laugh. Yeah, lucky me. She studied him quietly, her eyes soft but cautious. You're different from what they say humans are. What do they say? Reed asked. That humans destroy everything they touch, she said. That your kind only knows how to take. Reed looked away, ashamed. Maybe some of us did, but not all. For a moment neither spoke. The distant sound of the market faded, replaced by the slow thump of his heart. Lyra reached into her basket and handed him one of the glowing melons. Here, she said gently, if you wish to greet me properly. Touch this. Reed took the melon carefully. It was warm, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. When his fingers brushed the surface, it glowed brighter, casting a soft light on both their faces. Lyra smiled. Now you have greeted me in our way. Reed returned the smile. Good. Maybe now I can leave this planet alive. But deep inside, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. From the shadows above, unseen eyes watched them, and a voice whispered into a communicator. The human has bonded with the fruit maiden. Alert the temple. And so, as the sun set over Valen 5, their story truly began. Night fell over Tiravel City, and the glowing fruits of the market dimmed one by one. The once busy streets turned quiet, except for the hum of crystal patrol ships searching the alleys. The sky shimmered with twin moons, casting soft silver light across the walls. Hidden behind a cluster of empty fruit crates, Captain Reed and Lyra tried to stay as still as possible. Reed pressed his back against the cold wall, his heart still racing. They're not going to stop, are they? He whispered. Lyra shook her head slowly. Not until they find you. You touched me in public. They'll think you want to claim me as your mate. Reed frowned, lowering his voice. I didn't mean anything like that. It was a handshake. That's how humans show respect. Lyra's violet eyes glimmered faintly in the moonlight. Respect looks different here, human. To us, that gesture means a promise, one you cannot break. Reed gave a quiet sigh. Great. So now I'm accidentally married on an alien planet. She smiled a little, but her expression quickly turned serious. You don't understand. This is more than a marriage. The elder law says that anyone who forms a union with a human must be purified by the temple. That means... She paused, struggling to speak the word. Execution. Reed stared at her. Execution? For a handshake? Lyra looked down. They believe humans are cursed. Long ago, your kind destroyed one of our colonies. The temple decided no human may ever touch one of us again. He ran a hand through his hair. So I'm guilty for something that happened before I was born. She nodded sadly. That's how the old ways work. The law never forgets. From the distance came the faint echo of armored footsteps and the glow of scanning drones. Reed could see blue light sweeping through the alleys. He turned to Lyra. We can't stay here. Is there anywhere safe? Lyra hesitated. There's an old storage dome near the lower district. My mother used to work there. It's abandoned now. Then let's go. They moved quickly through narrow passageways, their shadows stretching across the glowing ground. The air smelled like burnt spice and ozone. Reed's boots made soft thuds while Lyra's bare feet barely touched the ground. Every sound felt too loud in the silence of the alien night. Finally, they reached a wide circular dome half buried under vines and dust. Inside, rows of glowing fruits filled the air with faint light, like hundreds of tiny lanterns. Reed could see faded murals on the walls, images of strange ceremonies, of hands touching glowing fruit, and of people bowing before giant trees. Lyra sat on an old wooden crate and sighed. This place was once full of joy. My people came here to celebrate harvests. Now it's forgotten like everything good. Reed crouched beside her. What happened to your people, Lyra? The soil died, she said quietly. The trees that grow our sacred fruit stopped blooming. Without them, our people lose strength. Some say the gods are angry. Others blame the war. Reed studied one of the fruits glowing faintly on the table. It looked weak, almost sick. Maybe it's not gods or curses. Maybe it's something else. I've seen planets like this before. Diseased soil, dying crops. It could be a fungus, a space mold that spreads between worlds. Lyra looked at him with surprise. You can fix it? I can try, Reed said. But I'd need samples and my ship's lab. It's at the port. She hesitated, then shook her head. You'll never reach it. The temple guards the port at night. They'll see you before you take one step. Reed clenched his jaw. Then I'll find another way. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Why are you helping me?" "You could have left me in the market," he smiled faintly. "Because you saved me first, and because it's the right thing to do." For a moment she said nothing. Then softly she murmured, "No human ever said that to me before." Silence filled the dome. Outside, the patrol lights passed, their glow sliding across the wall before fading away. Reed leaned back against the crate, closing his eyes for a moment, but Lyra kept watching him, her heart beating faster. She didn't know why she trusted him, or why her chest ached when she thought of him being captured. There was something different about this human. Then a voice echoed faintly outside the dome. "Search this sector. The Fruit Maiden and the human are near." Reed's eyes snapped open. He looked at Lyra. She whispered, "They've found us." He grabbed his small plasma pistol, checking its charge. "Then we'd better move fast." Lyra took one last look at the glowing fruits, the last sign of her fading world, and whispered, "May the moons guide us." As they slipped out through a hidden back door, the dome lights flickered weakly behind them. One fruit rolled off the table and cracked open on the floor. Inside, a faint seed pulsed with new life unseen by either of them. It was a small sign of hope. But the storm of fate was only just beginning. The alleyways of Tiravel City grew narrower as Reed and Lyra hurried deeper into the lower district. Above them, the night sky shimmered with twin moons, one silver, one blue, casting ghostly light on the cracked glass streets. The hum of patrol drones echoed faintly in the distance, like a swarm of insects searching for prey. Reed moved silently beside Lyra, his hand near his blaster, but his mind far away. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had said, that humans were forbidden to even touch her kind. He'd seen hundreds of worlds, each with its own strange laws, but this one felt different. It wasn't just fear. It was hate wrapped in faith. Finally, Lyra stopped in front of a rusted metal door covered in glowing alien symbols. "This way," she whispered. She pressed her palm against the surface. The symbols flickered, then the door slid open with a low hiss. Inside was a small chamber filled with floating lights, old books, and the faint hum of energy crystals. "This is my mother's old library," she said softly. "If you remember, it exists." Reed stepped inside carefully, brushing dust off one of the shelves. "Looks like she was a scholar." "She was," Lyra replied. "She studied the ancient laws of our people. She believed some of them were wrong, especially the ones about humans." Reed turned to her. "What happened to her?" Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "The temple accused her of heresy. They said she wanted to break the purity code. She was taken away when I was a child. I never saw her again." Reed's jaw tightened. "So the same people chasing us now took her too?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, the temple controls everything, the food, the trade, even the air we breathe. They say they protect us from corruption, but really, they protect their power." Reed walked to a large scroll lying open on a glowing desk. The writing was alien, but the images were clear. Two hands touching, one human, one alien surrounded by light. Below it, another image showed the same gesture but ending in fire and destruction. "This must be the law you mentioned," Reed said. "The one that forbids contact." Lyra joined him, her eyes soft with sadness. "It's called the Edict of Flesh. It says no Valen shall touch a being born of earth, for their blood carries ruin." She looked away. "They teach it to us as children. We believe it because we're afraid not to." Reed stared at the image of the fire again. What if that's not history? What if it's propaganda? Fear keeps people under control. Lyra looked at him, eyes wide. "You sound like my mother." Before Reed could reply, the crystal on the wall flickered red. A low siren hummed through the chamber. "They're scanning the district," Lyra whispered. "We have to go." Reed grabbed the scroll and rolled it up, tucking it into his jacket. "This law, they'll kill us for breaking it. But maybe it's the key to saving your people." Lyra frowned. "How can an old law save anyone?" He pointed toward the scroll. "If this curse between humans and your people is based on a lie, maybe your dying soil isn't a punishment from gods. Maybe it's the result of something they're hiding." Lyra hesitated. She wanted to believe him, but every part of her had been taught not to trust humans. Yet when she looked at him, this tired, stubborn man risking his life for her, something inside her shifted. A loud crash echoed outside. Reed moved quickly to the window and peeked through a crack. Crystal-armored guards were landing in the street, their weapons glowing faint blue. "They found us," he said. Lyra looked around desperately. "There's a tunnel behind the shelves. It leads to the old gardens." They ran toward the back, pushing aside dusty books and broken tablets. The wall slid open, revealing a narrow corridor lined with glowing vines. As they entered, the door sealed behind them with a soft hum. The tunnel opened into a vast underground space, an ancient garden filled with trees that shimmered faintly in the dark. Most of them were dead, their branches brittle and gray. A few still held glowing fruits that pulsed weakly like dying stars. "This is it," Lyra whispered. "The heart of our people. The first grove of the melons of greeting." Reed knelt beside a patch of soil, brushing his hand across the dry ground. It felt lifeless, cold. He pulled out a small scanning device from his belt and pressed it into the dirt. A faint blue light blinked. "It's infected," he murmured. "A fungal parasite, one that feeds on energy. It's choking the roots." Lyra knelt beside him, her voice trembling. "Can you cure it?" "Not from here," Reed said. "I need access to my ship's lab. And I'll need time." Lyra nodded slowly, determination replacing fear. "Then we'll get you there. But the temple will never let us pass." Reed stood, looking up at the glowing fruit above them. "Then we'll just have to make them believe in something they've forgotten." "What's that?" Lyra asked. Reed smiled faintly. "Hope." Outside the tunnels, the temple bells began to ring, an ancient sound that echoed through the sleeping city. The hunt for the human and the fruit maiden had truly begun. The faint light of dawn crept over Tiravel City, painting its glass towers in shades of pale blue and gold. The air carried the soft hum of morning markets and the distant toll of the temple bells. Deep below, hidden inside the ancient garden tunnels, Reed and Lyra sat beside the dying trees, their faces lit by the last flickering glow of the sacred fruits. Reed's small scanner blinked weakly in his hand. The readings were clear now. The soil wasn't cursed. It was poisoned. The fungal spores feeding on the planet's life energy were spreading through trade routes that connected Valen 5 to other worlds. The temple must have known, yet they did nothing. He looked at Lyra. "Your people aren't being punished by gods. They're being poisoned by something real, something that can be fixed." Lyra's eyes widened. "Fixed how?" Reed tapped his wrist device, bringing up a holographic image of his ship. "I have a serum, a nanotech compound that breaks down fungal cells. But I need materials from my ship's lab. Without them, I can't stop it." Lyra frowned, fear flickering in her gaze. "The temple controls the port. It's surrounded by guards. No one enters without permission." Reed leaned closer, voice low and calm. "Then we don't ask for permission. We go unseen," Lyra hesitated. "If they find us, they won't just kill you, Reed. They'll make me watch." He met her eyes, his voice steady. "Then they'll have to catch us first." They spent hours planning in the quiet shadows of the underground grove. Reed drew maps on the dusty floor using a broken branch, marking patrol zones and drone paths. Lyra added what she knew: the hidden tunnels, the blind spots in the temple scanners, and the routes used by smugglers who traded forbidden fruit. When they were done, Reed leaned back. "It's risky, but it'll work if we move at night. I'll sneak into the shipyard and grab what I need. You stay here where it's safe." Lyra shook her head firmly. "No, you don't know the city like I do." "I'll come." "Lyra, this isn't a game," Reed said quietly. "If you're caught—" She interrupted him with surprising strength in her voice. "If you die, my people die too. The soil, the fruit, the children, they all depend on this cure. So I'm coming, human." Reed stared at her for a moment, then sighed, smiling faintly. "You're as stubborn as I am." She smiled back. "Maybe that's why the gods brought you here." That night they began their journey. The city above shimmered with cold silver light. They moved through abandoned streets and overgrown gardens, silent as ghosts. The air was thick with mist, carrying the scent of old fruit and rain. Every corner held danger. Drones hovering with blue searchlights, guards marching in pairs, and giant crystal statues that seemed to watch them as they passed. Lyra led the way through narrow canals and broken glass tunnels, her steps light and sure. As they approached the port district, Reed stopped. The temple banners fluttered above the gates, glowing with symbols of purity and law. At the center stood the high priest's sigil, a golden eye surrounded by flames. Lyra whispered, "That's their command seal. Anyone without it is marked for death." Reed looked around. "Then we'll take one." Before Lyra could ask how, Reed pointed to a nearby patrol cart. 2 guards were checking scanner logs, unaware of the pair hiding behind the supply crates. Reed waited until the wind picked up, then moved swiftly. One quick motion. His arm wrapped around the first guard's neck, pulling him silent to the ground. Lyra, quicker than he expected, distracted the other with a sudden burst of glowing fruit spores that blinded his visor. Within seconds, it was done. Reed slipped the golden sigil off the fallen guard's armor and handed it to Lyra. "You're our ticket in." Lyra stared at him, surprised. "You've done this before." Reed shrugged. "Let's say I've had a rough education." They made their way to the docking bay, where the ship stood like sleeping beasts. Reed's vessel, the Starhawk, shimmered faintly in the shadows, a small craft, but armed with more technology than the Temple had ever seen. Inside, Reed rushed to the lab, grabbing serum vials and nanobot capsules. Lyra stood by the door, nervous but fascinated by everything she saw. Metal walls, glowing screens, and the gentle hum of alien machines. "What is this place?" she whispered. "My home," Reed said softly, "or what's left of it." When he turned back, Lyra was holding one of the vials carefully, her eyes shining with wonder. "This tiny thing, it can heal the land," he nodded. "If we can get it into the soil, yes." Suddenly, alarms blared across the port. Red lights flashed. Voices shouted outside, "They found us!" Lyra gasped. Reed grabbed her hand. "Time to go!" They dashed through the side hatch as plasma bolts struck the ship's hull. The air lit up with blue fire. Reed fired back with his blaster, covering their escape as Lyra pulled him toward a maintenance tunnel. As they ran through the smoke and echoing gunfire, Lyra shouted, "They'll never stop hunting us now." Reed grinned despite the chaos. "Good. That means we're close to something they're afraid of." Behind them, the Starhawk exploded in a flash of white light, shaking the night sky. But in Reed's pocket, one vial of the cure remained, still glowing softly like a tiny star. The explosion from the Starhawk lit the sky like a new sun. Fire rolled over the docks, turning steel and sand into rivers of glowing glass. In the distance, the great towers of Tiravel City reflected the blaze, their mirrored surfaces shining red and gold. Through the smoke, Reed and Lyra ran, shadows against a storm of light. The alarms echoed across the city, and the Temple's loudspeakers screamed warnings in the Valen tongue. The heretics flee toward the wastelands. The human must be captured alive. Lyra stumbled, clutching her arm where a shard of glass had cut through her sleeve. Reed caught her before she fell. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," she said, her voice trembling. "Keep going." They darted into an old drainage tunnel that opened to the desert beyond the city, a land where no one dared to go. The tunnel's end glowed faintly, leading them out into a sea of sand that shimmered like molten silver under the twin moons. For a long moment, Reed just stared. The neon desert stretched endlessly before them, glowing dunes rolling like waves and crystal formations rising like jagged towers. The air buzzed with static energy. Tiny sparks danced across the surface of the sand. Lyra looked at him, breathing hard. "No one comes here. The storms will melt the skin off your bones." Reed glanced at the horizon where faint lightning flickered inside the clouds. "Then they won't follow us far." He helped her climb the first dune, their footprints glowing faintly behind them. Above, the Temple ships appeared, sleek crystal crafts moving in formation, their spotlights sweeping across the desert like cold eyes. "They're scanning," Lyra whispered. Reed pointed toward a cluster of half-buried ruins up ahead. "Their cover." They slid down the dune and ducked into the remains of a broken outpost. The walls were covered in strange carvings, symbols of stars, trees, and hands joined in unity. The air was dry and heavy, carrying the faint scent of burnt ozone. Lyra pressed her back to the wall, gasping. Her wound was bleeding again. Reed tore a strip from his sleeve and tied it gently around her arm. "You'll be okay," she winced but nodded. "You risk everything for someone you just met, human." He smiled softly. "You saved my life first." "Seems fair." For a moment, silence fell between them, only the hum of the desert winds and the crackle of electric sand. Lyra looked at him closely, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You're not like the others they warned us about. And you're not like the monsters they told us to fear," he said quietly. Her lips curved into a small, tired smile. "Maybe that's the truth the Temple fears most, that we're not so different." Above them, a bright light cut through the darkness. A patrol ship had spotted the ruins. The wind howled as the vessel descended, sending ripples through the glowing sand. Reed pulled Lyra close. "Run when I say." "What about you?" she whispered. "Just trust me." He stepped out from behind the wall, raising his blaster. The ship's searchlights blinded him, but he fired anyway, 3 sharp bursts. The bolts hit a crystal ridge nearby, sending shards flying. The light scattered, confusing the ship's sensors for a few seconds, enough for Lyra to sprint toward the canyon ahead. "Now!" Reed shouted, running after her. They dashed across the glowing sand, the air crackling around them. The ship fired plasma bolts that exploded behind them like small suns. Each blast threw up a wave of glowing dust, lighting their path in flashes of blue and gold. Lyra tripped, her foot caught in a crack between crystal rocks. Reed grabbed her hand, pulling hard until she was free. He didn't let go as they ran, fingers locked together, moving as one through the storm. Finally, they reached the canyon, a narrow cut in the earth surrounded by cliffs that shimmered like glass. They ducked into the shadows as the ship passed overhead, scanning the dunes but missing the narrow gap below. When the sound faded, Lyra slumped against the wall, shaking. Reed handed her a canteen from his belt. "Drink." She took a small sip, her voice soft. "Thank you. For not leaving me." He smiled tiredly. "I've done enough running in my life. I'm not doing it alone anymore." Lyra looked at him for a long time, her chest rising and falling slowly. The light of the moons caught her face, and for a moment Reed forgot the danger, the chase, the fire. All he saw was the soft glow of her eyes. Then thunder rolled across the sky. The neon storm was coming. Bolts of light arced between the dunes, turning night into day. The air vibrated with raw energy. Lyra's voice shook. "The storm, it'll kill us if we stay out here." Reed looked deeper into the canyon where faint blue light shimmered like water. "Then we find shelter there." He took her hand again, and together they disappeared into the glowing depths of the canyon, while the storm howled behind them like a living beast. In the distance, the temple's fleet circled above, searching. But the desert itself seemed to guard its fugitives that night, wrapping them in lightning and silence. And deep beneath the glowing sand, something ancient stirred. Watching, waiting for the touch of human and alien hands had awakened more than love or fear. It had awakened change. The storm raged across the neon desert for hours, a wild sea of glowing dust and lightning that swallowed everything in its path. But deep inside the canyon, Reed and Lyra found refuge in an ancient cave. Its walls shimmered with old carvings, the same symbols of joined hands and glowing fruit they had seen before. The air was still, heavy with forgotten prayers. Reed sat near a faintly glowing pool, checking the last vial of serum in his hand. The soft blue light reflected on his face, mixing with exhaustion and quiet determination. "This is all that's left," he murmured. "If we fail, there's no second chance." Lyra stood beside him, her wounds bandaged but her eyes steady. "Then we won't fail. My people will listen when they see the truth." Reed looked at her sadly. "You really believe that?" "They called you a traitor." She met his gaze. "Belief is all I have left. My mother once said that truth shines brightest in darkness. If we reach the Temple of Trials, the truth will show itself." Reed nodded slowly. "Then the temple it is." By dawn, the storm had calmed. The desert lay still under pale sunlight, the sand glowing softly like cooled metal. They began their journey back toward the heart of the city. Moving through hidden ravines and underground passages Lyra remembered from her childhood stories. When they finally reached the outskirts of Tiravel, the city looked like a sleeping giant, quiet, cold, and watched by towering statues of the High Elders. In the distance, the Temple of Trials rose above all else, its crystal spires glowing white under the morning sky. It looked like a palace carved from light, but Reed could feel the danger hidden beneath its beauty. They waited until nightfall before approaching. The temple gates were guarded by armored sentinels, their eyes glowing blue under their helmets. Lyra whispered, "Once we enter, there's no turning back." Reed glanced at her. "We never planned to turn back." With the stolen sigil still in her pocket, Lyra stepped forward. The guards bowed slightly as the symbol flashed on her wrist. "Daughter of the Old Line," one guard said formally. "You may enter." Reed followed her, keeping his head low. The moment they crossed the gates, cold air brushed against their faces, heavy, almost sacred. Inside, the temple was vast and silent. Rivers of light ran through the floor, feeding into giant glowing trees carved from crystal. Every wall shimmered with ancient inscriptions telling stories of gods and sinners, peace and punishment. Lyra's voice trembled. This is where they judged my mother. Reed placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let's make this where her truth is reborn. They moved quietly to the central garden chamber. There, in the center of the marble floor, stood the sacred soil, dark and dry, surrounded by withered vines. The fruits that once glowed bright were now dull, cracked and lifeless. Reed knelt and opened the vial. Once this mixes with the roots, the nanobots will clean the fungus from the soil. The land should start healing within hours. Lyra looked around nervously. And if we're caught before that? He gave a faint grin. Then we make it count. He poured the serum carefully into the soil. The blue liquid sank into the ground, vanishing within seconds. For a moment, nothing happened. Then faint light began to pulse beneath the surface. The vines twitched and a single leaf unfurled, fresh, green, alive. Lyra gasped softly. It's working. Before Reed could reply, a voice thundered through the chamber. Stop! Dozens of guards stormed in, weapons glowing. Behind them walked the High Elder, his golden robes gleaming like fire. His eyes locked on Reed with cold fury. The human brings corruption into the house of purity. Reed stood slowly, shielding Lyra behind him. No, I bring life. Look at your soil, it's alive again. But the Elder's voice was like ice. Blasphemy! You poison our sacred ground! He raised his staff and lightning-like energy burst toward Reed. Lyra screamed and threw herself between them. The bolt struck the ground near her feet, cracking the marble. Father, stop, she cried. The Elder froze. His voice softened slightly. Lyra, my daughter, you would defy the temple for this creature? Her voice shook, but her words were clear. For truth, yes. He's not the curse they are. She pointed to the glowing soil where new vines were spreading. The gods are not angry. We were blind. The crowd murmured, eyes wide at the miracle forming before them. The Elder stared in disbelief as more vines rose from the earth, glowing softly under the temple's light. The fruit began to bloom again after centuries of silence. Reed fell to his knees, exhausted but smiling. Lyra rushed to him, tears in her eyes. You did it, human. You healed our world. Reed looked at her weakly. No, Lyra. We did it. The Elder stepped closer, eyes full of shock and shame. The law. It was wrong. Reed's vision blurred. The last thing he saw was Lyra's face, soft, shining, full of life as she held his hand. The temple bells began to ring, not for judgment this time, but for rebirth. The temple bells echoed through the city, their deep tones rolling across Tiravel like waves of light. For the first time in generations, they did not ring for judgment or war, but for life. Under the high crystal ceiling of the Temple of Trials, the once dead vines now shimmered with color. Golden leaves glowed softly, and fruits pulsed with light, their reflections dancing across the marble floors. The sacred garden, dead for centuries, was alive again. But Reed lay still on the ground, his chest rising and falling weakly. The final surge of energy from the serum had drained him completely. His hands were covered in glowing soil, and faint blue veins traced up his arms from where the nanobots had bonded with his skin. Beside him, Lyra knelt, tears running down her silver cheeks. Stay with me, human, she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. You can't leave now, not after all this. Around them, guards and priests stood frozen, their weapons lowered, their faces uncertain. The High Elder, Lyra's father, stared at the blooming vines with wide, trembling eyes. The miracle had silenced every voice in the temple. Then, slowly, the Elder stepped forward. His golden robes dragged softly against the glowing floor. He stopped beside his daughter and looked down at the wounded human. He should not be alive, the Elder murmured, and yet the soil answers to his touch. Lyra lifted her head, her voice shaking but strong. Because he never came here to destroy us, Father. He came to heal. The Elder looked into her eyes, so much like her mother's, and something inside him broke. He knelt beside Reed, placing a trembling hand over the human's chest. You carry no curse, he said softly. You carry hope. Lyra smiled weakly through her tears. Then let him live, Father. Please. The Elder turned to the crowd of priests and soldiers. His voice echoed through the hall, deep and powerful. Let it be known, this human is no enemy. The edict of flesh is ended. From this day, the hands of Earth and Valen may meet in peace. A murmur spread through the crowd. Hesitant at first, then growing louder, soldiers dropped to their knees. The old priests bowed their heads. For the first time in centuries, the ancient symbol of unity, a human hand and a Valen hand joined, glowed once more on the temple walls. Lyra looked back at Reed, still holding his hand. "You did it," she whispered. "You changed everything." Reed's lips moved faintly. "Did we win?" She laughed softly, her voice trembling. "Yes, you can rest now," but Reed shook his head weakly. "No, not yet." He tried to sit up, groaning as pain shot through his body. "If the soil is healing, it needs guidance, someone to tend it. Someone who believes." Lyra touched his shoulder gently. "Then I'll stay. I'll help it grow." He smiled faintly, his eyes closing. "Good. You're better at growing things than I am." For a long moment, the temple was quiet. The light from the fruit trees spread across the city like dawn, painting every rooftop and every face with warmth. Outside, the neon desert glowed brighter, as if the planet itself was breathing again. When Reed finally woke, the world had changed. He opened his eyes to find himself lying in a soft bed inside a sunlit chamber. The sound of laughter and music drifted in from outside. The air was filled with the scent of sweet fruit and rain. Lyra stood by the window, her silver skin glowing in the daylight. She turned as she heard him move. Her smile was bright, peaceful, full of life. "You're awake." Reed sat up slowly. His chest no longer burned and his hands were clean, though faint blue lines still shimmered beneath his skin. "How long was I out?" 3 days, she said gently. The temple declared peace on the second. He looked around. The room was decorated with living vines, their fruits glowing softly like tiny suns. "So it's real," he said. They accepted it. Lyra nodded. "The soil lives. The fruits bloom again. My father sent messengers to the stars to tell the other worlds. Humans are no longer forbidden." Reed smiled faintly, relief washing over him. "Guess I owe the universe a few handshakes now." Lyra laughed quietly and picked up a small basket from the table. Inside were 2 shining melons, their glow soft and inviting. She walked closer and held one out to him. "This time," she said with a playful smile, "greet me properly." Reed chuckled and reached for the fruit. His fingers brushed against its smooth surface and it glowed brighter, filling the room with golden light. Lyra placed her hand gently over his. "On my world, this means peace, trust, and a promise of a future." He looked into her glowing violet eyes and whispered, "Then I'll keep that promise." Outside, the bells rang again, not for war, not for death, but for union. The people of 2 worlds stood side by side in the city square, humans and Valen exchanging cautious smiles and greetings. Children laughed as they shared fruit under the twin suns. From the window, Reed and Lyra watched in silence, their hands still joined over the glowing melon. A breeze carried through the room, soft and warm, as if the planet itself sighed in peace. Lyra whispered, "Welcome home, human." Reed smiled softly. "Home," he repeated, his eyes on the glowing horizon, and far beyond the city, where the neon desert met the sky, the first new tree of life began to bloom, its roots spreading through the healed soil, carrying the memory of a single touch that changed the fate of 2 worlds forever.